Welcome to another week of Football Insiders. Jason Andera, Midco Sports, along with Michael McCleary of the Argus Leader. And we've got a special guest today, 4 special guests. What do we got here, Michael?
It's President's Bowl week.
President's Bowl week, and they've
got
made
a new trophy.
Brand new trophy, 2 identical trophies to give out to the 2 winners. This year, the President's Bowl on Saturday, and it'll feature all 4 Sioux Falls public school teams going against each other. This is the first time they've done that, so they thought, let's put a new tradition together and put a traveling trophy. And we're lucky enough to be sitting next to these 4 good-looking gentlemen. We're going to talk about all those teams. In fact, that's where we're going to start the show. Even though the President's Bowl is on Saturday, we're going to talk about those games first. And the first one of the day will be Roosevelt and Washington. Now, these are 2 teams not used to being 0-2 at the beginning of the season. There's going to be some scrambling going on for these 2 teams to get their first win of the year.
Yeah, and you've seen good things from both teams at the start of the year too. So, you know, I think this is going to be a bounce-back week for obviously one of the teams. And then, you know, this is 0-3 is not a position where either of these teams expected to be, but one team is going to leave this week 0-3, which is a little disappointing, I'm sure, for one sideline. But yeah, it's definitely an opportunity for a bounce-back for both these programs.
It was interesting listening to the coaches talk, and both Washington and Roosevelt talked about how after the first week there's a lot of positive takeaways and they had things they could take away, and then last week things got out of control for both teams as Washington went down to Jefferson. It wasn't a game in the second half, and then Roosevelt got down 28-0 against O'Gorman. It's going to be a lot different this time. These 2 teams a lot closer in talent, I think.
Yeah, and both took a similar tune in the sense that at halftime it wasn't really close, and it wasn't really likely that they were going to win the game, but they're talking about finishing, and they both teams said that they're really pleased with how their team played after halftime. And going into this game, Washington head coach Ryan Evans said that they had their best practice ever this past Monday. So, there's a lot of excitement around these 2 teams, and just continuing on the season and having this opportunity to bounce back in a game like this.
In game 2, maybe the most anticipated game we've had in a President's Bowl in a long time. Vince Benedetto's Jefferson Cavaliers are ranked number 1, and they face off against fellow 2-0 team from Lincoln, and they are also looking for their 3rd win of the season. This one should be a lot of fun, a lot of reasons to be excited about both these teams.
Yeah, and incredibly, Jefferson is actually the more experienced team as far as senior leaders go. But these are 2 teams that I'm really high on. Obviously, Jefferson, can do things so well on the offensive side of the ball, but they really proved it with their defense early on. And Lincoln had their first really sort of breakout game last week after sort of maybe coming a little bit slower offensively in their first game of the season against Roosevelt. But I think Roosevelt had a big thing to do with that. Right. But yeah, I mean, both these teams are coming in playing really well. Like, they're 2-0 emphatically.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited for this game. I think it's going to be close. I think that the defenses might challenge the other offenses in the way that they haven't really been challenged so far this season. So, yeah, I'm really excited for this one.
We got really exciting quarterbacks in this game. Taylor Ashley left the game last week in the middle of the game. Vince Benedetto said he had an injured calf, but it was more precautionary because the game was totally in hand, and he is fully good to go in this one, so no worries about Taylor Ashley. And then Tate Schaefer on the other side of the ball had some problems with interceptions last year. The first game of the year against Roosevelt, again, had a couple problems but came back strong, and he's one of those guys that just seems to forget about the past and play in the moment, and Tate Schaefer has a chance to be a really special player at this level as well. The quarterback's both great in this one, and the receiving core is on both these teams. So if you like watching teams chuck the ball a little bit, I think this one's going to be fun.
Yeah, obviously, on Jefferson's side, you got Griffin Wilde, who's maybe the best wide receiver in the state. Yeah. But, Lincoln's got a really nice cast of receivers, too, with Jack Smith, Isaac Swarovski. They got a lot of guys who can make plays after the catch, make plays deep. So I'm really excited for that, too.
Yeah, that'll be a lot of fun on Saturday. We'll have that live on Midco Sports. I'm sure you guys will be covering those games as well for the President's Bowl. But Friday night, not as full of a schedule as usual. We have Harrisburg taking on Stevens. That'll be an interesting game. Those 2 teams ranked very similarly as far as how the media sees them. Harrisburg coming off a really good, nice week last week against Brandon Valley. Stevens coming off of lesser competition in Douglas and handling them easily. It'll be interesting to see how this one plays out. What's your thoughts on Harrisburg and Stevens?
Yeah, well, Harrisburg, obviously, another team that I don't think we expected to be 0-2 would be, Brandon Valley, coming off that game against Harrisburg. That was a really, really interesting game. The two teams that played in the championship last year going up against each other. And, Harrisburg really, really looks like the better team in that matchup. But, so they showed a lot of really impressive things in that game. And I think going into a matchup with Stevens, who's 2-0 for the first time in, I believe, since 2010, if I read that correctly, there's a lot of momentum from both teams coming into this matchup, and I'm really excited to see how things play out there.
Yeah, I think this Harrisburg team found their identity a little bit. Their running back, Gavin Ross, did not play last week, and probably not going to see him for at least a few more weeks. It may even be till the end of the season before we see Gavin Ross play. But they were still able to run the football, and they were able to put a lot of pressure on the quarterback. They looked really good in that aspect, and their quarterback, Elrod, looked much better than he did in week one. So positive signs for this Tiger team. Stevens also has some positive signs. We're going to see if Stevens is for real. A lot of people voted Stevens higher in the poll. Some people voted Harrisburg higher in the poll. I personally voted Harrisburg higher. But we'll see. It'll be interesting, especially out in Rapid City. Yeah,
I am a little bit higher on Harrisburg than I am Stevens too, but sort of right next to each other,
right.
Even still. So, you obviously want to give credit to Stevens for the 2-0 start, so I did have them as my top 5, but I think I had it 4-5.
Right. Brandon Valley, 0-2. Rapid City Central, 0-2. They'll play each other on Saturday as well. And right now, Rapid City Central just having trouble doing anything on offense. Brandon Valley will try to get right against them. And then Friday night, O'Gorman is the last 11 AAA team, but man, they are not the least for sure. This is a team that I've had more people come up to me and say, did you see this coming? Did you see this coming? Did you see this coming? O'Gorman dominating the first 2 weeks.
Well, I remember beginning of the season before it even started, just sort of talking to some coaches before the season. I would put O'Gorman, right up there and, sort of that 1-2 range. And, some people were, I guess convincing me otherwise.
Yeah,
and,
why not?
I
trust your instincts, Michael.
Yeah. And I guess I didn't, because that's not really necessarily how I voted. But, O'Gorman is, I expect them to be up near the top. I didn't expect them to be this good. And I don't think a lot of people on O'Gorman's sideline really expected them to be that good either. They probably knew that with the skill players that they had returning, they had a good base. But, to just put up these just incredible numbers just right off the bat and, jump ahead on teams like they have.
Right.
That's the most incredible part. It's really not taking time for O'Gorman to just sort of, get up on teams big. Like they're sort of up and at it immediately.
Yeah. And I don't know if this is sacrilege or not, but O'Gorman may have their toughest test against a double-A team coming up this week. They play T-Area, a team that has been dominant at home over the last few seasons, and O'Gorman has to go to T-Area. It'll be an interesting matchup. This T team is definitely not one to sleep on.
Yeah, absolutely. And, they obviously are off to a 2-0 start too. Everybody's talking about who's going to compete with Pierre in AA. And T can really prove by, sticking with or maybe even beating a AAA team that, T's for real. So, I'm really excited to see this because it's a test for O'Gorman, but it's a huge test for T, playing up a class. And, we'll see if they're up for the task.
It'll be a lot of fun to check that out on Friday night. In 11 AA, the polls stayed pretty much the same. Brookings took a loss to Pierre. You were at that game. Just impressions of how good this Pierre Governor team really is.
Ooh, it was not close from the very start. And, Brookings is a good football team. Pierre coach Steve Steele was saying that after the game. Brookings is a team that they expected to give them maybe a little bit more difficulty, but, this team remains a good football team. And, what Pierre did to them doesn't really change that. But, Pierre's going to beat a lot of good football teams this year. And, sometimes they're going to beat those teams 48-0. So, I just think that says a lot more about how great Pierre is than, maybe us overestimating Brookings at this point of the season. I think Brookings is going to win a lot of big games this year, but Pierre's just on another level.
I totally agree. And Pierre helped themselves out a lot, too, in some big third down situations where they were fortunate to find a way to get out of third and long, and that really propelled them early, and that salted the game away. Lincoln Kienholz, another 3 passing, 3 rushing touchdown game. They are looking good. We already talked about T area a little bit. Yankton at number 3, a little slow start against Spearfish, but they had a very nice ending against Spearfish. And Rugby Riken, he continues to just put up monster numbers. I don't know if you've seen this guy on tape yet, but he's Houdini in the backfield. This guy is a lot of fun to watch. They take on Watertown this week, who's receiving some votes. And that's kind of the same as last week. Yankton, T, maybe one of those teams can compete with Pierre, maybe they can't, but that feels like your 2 contenders.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to eventually get out to a Yankton game because, just from experience going to a Pierre game, you see the numbers with Lincoln Kienholz, you see the numbers with Rugby Riken, but until I got to see Lincoln Kienholz in person, you just see how easy the game is for him and how, it almost seems like he's moving at half speed when he beats everybody to the outside and gets a rushing touchdown. I mean, it could be the same thing with rugby, and it'll be really interesting to see him in person and just sort of get a gauge of just how good he is, and if he is really that good. I mean, there is a chance that they are competing with Pierre towards the end of the year.
Yeah, I had a chance. I reached out to Brady Muth, head coach of Yankton, and he said sometimes it feels like I should have to pay. Now I'm on the clock. I should have to pay to watch Rugby Riken. He's so fun to watch. But he also said we need to get more physical and more aggressive. He knows that there's some tougher competition coming ahead, and Watertown is one of those teams, so that'll be fun to see. The rest of AA, we saw Mitchell and Sturgis play each other. Mitchell got the win, so they're back in the top 5 at this point. But that top 4 seems pretty solid for right now, with Brookings staying at number 4. Let's go on to 11A now, and this, man, it's been a crazy division so far this year, class this year, and West Central came in as the number 1 team last week. I went out to watch that game against Sioux Falls Christian, and it felt like a very even game at times, and it felt easy for West Central sometimes, but then West Central gave Sioux Falls Christian the game on 3 interceptions at different times in the game and made it really close. In the end, I'm still sold that Sioux Falls Christian could be a top 5 team, and I'm still sold that West Central might be the best team in 11A. Thoughts on 11A from you, Michael?
Yeah, I actually wrote about this week in the Argus, which you could read right now. I think Sioux Falls Christian, looking at some of the 0-2 teams in the state, I mean, they're one of the teams I believe in probably the most. Just with some of the things that they've been able to do to legitimate teams in Class 11A this year, I think Canton is a really good team as well. And so for them to be sticking with those teams, even if that's not how the game felt like at all points, they're still able to make plays, and the final score is the final score. So they maybe they have a few things to figure out, but eventually these close games against really good opponents, they're going to turn into some pretty big wins against maybe some lesser competition.
Yeah, I agree. I think we've got a lot of season left in 11A. You got Dakota Valley, Sioux Falls Christian, West Central, Delta Rapids, all these teams looking good. But how about the Beresford Watchdogs? They go into Canton in a really tough environment. They score 1 touchdown, and that's enough to win. And that's about right. Canton, maybe some question marks offensively, but defensively we know they're good. But this Beresford team, look at them. They're up to 2-0 already. Yeah,
and similar thing with Beresford. They sort of made their championship run last year by, kind of low-scoring games and just getting ahead of people with defense. And, I mean, they've proved they're legit, and moving up a class, they're 2-0. We talked about Canton. Canton's a really, really good football team. They proved it in week 1, and yeah, I mean, I've been sort of maybe a little bit higher than the rankings were in Beresford. I think I had them in my rankings, last week, but they're a good football team, and I think they're going to stick in the rankings for a little while.
Well, we've got a couple of those games to talk about coming up this week that'll be interesting. One of those, Canton and Lennox. I talked to Matthew Luzzi. I got an email from him. He said they're going to be a really tough match. It's always going to be physical. This is called the Black and Blue Bowl. It kind of goes way back between Lennox and Canton. And this year, Lennox, an undefeated team that's kind of hanging around the rankings. They have a chance to really prove that they belong. Meanwhile, Canton, coming off a loss, they want to prove that they're still an elite team. So I think that will be a lot of fun. But one of the more interesting games to look forward to is Beresford coming off a 2-0 start. They play Winner, the number 1 team in 11B. And when I talked to the Beresford coach, he said, Scott Ebert, Winter is 38-1 over the last 39 games with 2 state titles, and they don't lose at home. And that's another huge advantage for Winter, is playing in the bowl out there. This is going to be a big test, though. This Beresford team comes in, they're physical. Trent Olson knows he's got his hands full in this one.
Yeah, I mean 38-1 though. That says basically all you need to know. But Winter is obviously a ground and pound football team.
Winter in a long time though.
Yeah, I mean, and probably one of the tougher games for Beresford in a while too.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, they played in the same class last year, but Winter and Beresford didn't really go up against each other much in the past couple years. So, this is sort of a new opponent as far as the last couple of years go for Beresford, and they're playing a lot of new opponents this year. So, it'll be interesting to see how they do.
Another couple games to watch in 11A. Dakota Valley takes on Sioux Falls Christian. That should be a lot of fun in West Central at Madison. So a couple tests for ranked teams coming up there as well. I want to touch on 11B quickly. We talked about Winter and how they just continue to dominate. Bridgewater Emery-Ethan struggled in the first half against Clark Willow Lake, ended up getting the victory, but there's a lot of momentum now going toward Elk Point-Jefferson and the show that they put on against a ranked Sioux Valley team. I have them at number 2. The coaches poll have them at number 2, but a lot of people still hanging on to tradition with Bridgewater Emery-Ethan. How do you compare those teams?
Yeah, I have Elk Point-Jefferson at my number 2 too. Also, I mean, you could call out the game from last week, and just see what they did against Sioux Valley, who we saw the first 2 games of the season, looked pretty good. Mm-hmm. But also, if you look at their 2 games before that, they haven't let up a point all season long. They average just around 52 points a game, and they haven't let anybody score at all. Not even a field goal, not a safety, nothing. So Elk Point-Jefferson is really, really good, and to get sort of that top 5 matchup to prove that they're at that level, I really think that's something that they needed, and they got it last week. So they've proven it for me. Maybe not to go above Winter, because Winter sort of has that spot, but these are the types of scores that Winter put up against teams last year when they had that dominant year. So I think that Sioux Valley win was a big win for them, and I'm really excited about this team.
Yeah, this Elk Point-Jefferson team, you hit the nail on the head though. The defense is really what's propelled them. A lot of people look at their 2 all-state type running backs, Lucas Easier and Ben Swatek, but they don't get it done without great field position. And they got another defensive touchdown last week. Elk Point-Jefferson looks really good, so it'll be fun to watch and see how they progress throughout the season. In 9-man football, a lot of activity last week. We saw Canastota go down, a number 1 team go down in 9A. Viborg-Hurley beat them, and Viborg-Hurley, they might be one of these surprise teams this year. Last year maybe a little overrated. This year maybe a little underrated. They looked really good in their games. Other than that, Howard struggled a little bit as the 9AA number 1. They played against Kimball White Lake. I reached out to Pat Rummel, and sometimes when you see a score like that, you're just like, what happened? What happened? And he's like, we just didn't play up to our best potential, and Kimball White Lake outplayed us in a lot of aspects of that game. It just makes you kind of wonder where we're at with the rankings after a lot of these games, or a lot of these teams have played 3 games. Still a lot of question marks even for these top teams so far.
Yeah, and from my perspective, the only team that really hasn't, especially non-AA, the only team that really hasn't shown much give is Wall.
Yeah.
They're putting up really, really big numbers. It was sort of the same story as last year, where maybe the competition and maybe the teams that they're playing, like you wonder about that sort of early part of the season. But I mean, you could look at it from 2 ways with Howard in their game. I mean, this was a challenge for them. This was a test, but they still were able to escape with the win. So, that says something about their football team. They could win the games that might be easier for them, but they could also win the games that they have a little bit more difficult time with. So, that shows character of a football team, and I think that's something that you can't necessarily knock them for.
Yeah, that's interesting. I agree. Wall is a team to be reckoned with. They have a Kadoka area, a team that's shown that they can play with some high-level 9-man football teams. Had a good game with Lyman last week. That'll be interesting. Best challenge so far for Wall this year. But 9AA, you still have Hamlin undefeated, and then you got Parkston and Hanson going at it this week. 2 ranked teams in that 4-5 spot, and that'll be interesting to see if maybe one of those teams has a chance to make a statement. I think Hanson is a team to be reckoned with, but Parkston's playing the part so far as well. 9A, Gregory moves up to number 1 after Canastota just Canastota got a loss, and there was several votes for number 1 teams. You saw Gregory get some love, Warner got some love, Castlewood got some love, and then some people still going with Canastota despite the loss to an undefeated 9AA team. So 9A looks like it's in flux. 9B got shook up a little bit as Avon took their first loss of the year. Kadoka area got their first loss of the year. So Harriet Selby kind of cruising in, getting all those number 1 votes now after Del St. Mary has kind of fallen off, and you got them and Hitchcock-Tulare as the 2 undefeated teams that look like they're atop of 9B right now. So look forward to seeing how 9B shakes out in the next couple of weeks as well. Mike, what are you looking forward to this week, and what kind of coverage can we expect from the Argus Leader?
Well, we're definitely going to be going all in on the President's Bowl. I'll be doing a preview, which will come out in a couple, maybe tomorrow morning. So that'll be cool, and I'm really excited for these President's Bowl games. This will be actually my first look at Jefferson so far this year. Obviously, from afar, they look pretty good. Yeah. First look at Jefferson, and also first look at Washington. So I'm really excited to see both those teams play. Coaches were saying it all day. I mean, it's there's a fun time of year. There's a really great event, so it's going to be a lot of good football.
Yeah, we should mention the reason we have the President's Bowl trophy is we were at the President's Bowl lunch today. We're sitting outside of Shenanigans doing the show, and we had a chance to talk to all the coaches. And I'm the same as you. I haven't seen Jefferson up close and personal yet this year. I've watched the other 3 teams, and it'll be a lot of fun checking out those games on Saturday. We've got those games live on Midco Sports. You can check them out there, but please go to the game if you can, because it's a great experience and a lot of fun just to be around that many South Dakota high school football fans at the same time. And as usual, you can tune into Varsity Sports Live every Friday night at 10:30, where we have a wrap-up of all the top games across South Dakota high school football. For Michael McCleary, I'm Jason Andera. That'll do it for another week of Football Insiders.